Today we're going to talk about Cyrus, a history of Cyrus in 40 minutes, maybe 45. It depends if everybody is awake still. So Cyrus, Cyrus the Great and the rise of the Persian Empire, or as someone just asked me, the Achaemenid Empire, the name of the empire that Cyrus establishes. It's interesting that up to about 100 years ago, for Persians or Iranians living in Iran, and I would say in Afghanistan probably as well, as part of this larger Persianate world, and even Tajikistan, further into Central Asia, people learned about their history either going to school, reading traditional history, or many people who were illiterate, let's think about 100 or 150 years ago, going to coffee houses like this, smoking a little bit of qelyun, and a storyteller recounting the stories of the past. So telling the tales of the past. And that you would have found probably in Greece. It's quite common in several of these civilizations that are very much in tune with their oral tradition and narratives. And interestingly, there was no mention of Cyrus in any of these. How's that possible? Well, the reason for that is that it was in the European tradition and through Greek authors, such as Herodotus, Xenophon, and Ctesias, who specifically wrote on Cyrus, and they kept this tradition, which passed from the Greeks through historical circumstances to Europe. And when these texts were translated, of course, into then Latin and then into modern European languages, there was a constant knowledge of this Achaemenid Empire, the empire that Cyrus establishes, which lasts from 550 BC to 330 BC. Definitely the largest empire of the antiquity, and of course established by Cyrus. This was what the Europeans knew about, that there was a founder of an empire, and Persepolis, the second great capital, was this mighty capital or world capital of the Achaemenids that stretched from the Nile, Egypt, all the way to India, the Indus. So from river to river, if you want to call it, okay? And encompassed three great river civilizations, that of Egypt, that of Mesopotamia, and that of India, all together for about 200 years. But the Iranians did not know about this until the 19th century, when ideas and works from Europe began to trickle into Iran, and they were beginning to get translated into Persian. And so we have the first, for example, great inscription of Darius, the third great Achaemenid king, who has left us an inscription, which is in the packet in your handout, probably the last page, which is on a cliff, the longest cuneiform rock relief inscription. It was translated in the 19th century by a scholar named Rawlinson, who was in Britain, who had gone on behalf of the British Museum. Well, he had gone actually, I was an officer in the British Army, had gone to Iran from India. And he had translated it. And this translation in Persian was presented to Muhammad Shah Qajar for the first time in Persian. Here is, sir, the great inscription of your great-great ancestor. And with that, and the steady translation of these ancient documents from French and English, the Iranians themselves began to actually notice that there was this great empire. A person who I think is quite brilliant at this time, his name is Etemad al-Saltaneh, who was actually a minister of the Qajar. This is 19th century Persian dynasty, was instrumental in having these texts translated, disseminated, and suddenly the Iranian population figured out that they had this great empire in antiquity. So we get to the next dynasty, the Pahlavi dynasty, which succeeded the Qajars, and they ruled from the 1920s to be relative to 1970s, late 70s. Certainly now took advantage of this great past and staged great celebrations in honor of Cyrus and the establishment of this great Persian empire. So here's an image of the last king of Iran walking through this procession to Pasargadae, the capital of Cyrus. On the upper right-hand side are the tents for the guests that came from many countries, which was a fabulous feast and several nights of parades and whatnot, right by Persepolis, which is right below these tents. So there was celebration, and the Pahlavis certainly were very fond of it. Upper right-hand side, I collect stamps. So stamps tell us about what is in vogue. Many of these types of stamps with the Cyrus cylinder, I think now you are familiar with, were printed in 1971. Here is the tomb of Cyrus the Great, and there is the last Shah of Iran with the Empress and the court before the Pasargadae, the tomb of Cyrus. And so there was a connection sort of made that there is this 2,500 years of monarchy in this Iranian or Persianate world. Then came 1979. And there was a revolution in Iran, if you did not know. And of course, the revolution was anti-monarchic, and it was certainly anti-Pahlavis, the last dynasty. So probably whatever the previous dynasty was for, the new revolutionary government would be against. This is quite common. And I just put a paper money from the Islamic Republic of Iran post-1979 where a mosque is showing rather than a Cyrus cylinder. I just want you to see the gravitation of interest. So mosques, this is a Master the Shah or Master the Imam as it's known, the mosque in Isfahan, a great mosque from the 16th, 17th century. So it's not that they didn't like art. Their interest is now into what we today in the West call Islamic art, a beautiful Persian mosque. So they were trying to downplay the ancient past, perhaps because the Pahlavis were very much playing it up. And so what happens is, especially the youth these days who are not so fond of perhaps some of the practices of the government in Iran today, have taken quite a liking to Cyrus. And so you can see during the Persian New Year, some of the youth are going before the tomb of Cyrus the Great. There is a Hafsin table. It's a table, it's set before the Persian New Year on spring equinox to celebrate not only the Persian New Year, but also they're throwing flowers at the tomb. So you can see there's this now very special relationship to this monument and the idea and the figure of Cyrus. So that is its modern 150-year history. And of course, Mr. Ahmadinejad, the last, the previous president of Iran, also had the cylinder brought to Tehran, to the National Museum several years ago, and there was a great parade. So suddenly Cyrus became a great hero again, as a nationalist hero. So they made even a bigger cylinder. Do you see that cylinder behind it? It's a little bit bigger than the one that we were seeing, right? And there's a Persepolis gate, and you've got Persian soldiers, and so on. So Cyrus now is beloved again. So you can't get him down. He'll come back. So why is he so popular? And was he popular before this time as well? What did he do if he was popular to make him even more popular? Who is he? So these are some of the basic questions I like to bring up, and I'd like to now go through a journey through Cyrus and the place that Cyrus came and what he did. And there's a reason I've put that winged man who seems to have come from outer space with the interesting crown, the wings, and so on, because certain scholars think that is the image of Cyrus, the only image we have. Certain scholars think. And you should ask why. And I'll explain that. Here's our cylinder, which looks bigger than the one we just saw upstairs. For Achaemenid history, the history of this Persian Empire, we are reliant on mainly several groups of sources. One are Mesopotamian or Babylonian documents. So what Cyrus is having presented to us here in this cylinder is written in the Akkadian dialect, in the Babylonian dialect of the Akkadian language. It's Semitic language, because the people in Babylonia, in Mesopotamia, predominantly spoke Semitic languages, okay, from antiquity, distant antiquity. And so we have a Nabonidus chronicle. Nabonidus is the previous king before Cyrus, who has left us a long chronicle. There's the Cyrus Cylinder, which is his own sayings in the Babylonian language, because he wrote it for the Babylonians who were inhabiting that city. And it's about 44 lines. We have a third of it that survives for us. And it's about his life. It's his resume and what he believes in. We have other important documents for the later Achaemenid Empire. These are called the Persepolis fortification tablets. There are about 30,000 of these, which give us a sense of the inner workings of this empire that were found at Persepolis, and most of them are at the University of Chicago in the Oriental Institute. And here are two of these administrative documents written in the Elamite language. And Elamite is not related to any other language. So very interesting language. So you make a sketch and then you try to translate it. So we have Elamite scribes giving us the inner workings of the empire in Elamite. Babylonians telling us about political developments. But of course, another important source for antiquity is not only the Hebrew Bible, but also Aramaic documents. We will see that the Jews and the Persians are very much close in contact and working together, unlike some of the things that we hear, unfortunately, today in terms of relations between Iran and Israel. But in antiquity, there was a very close relationship. In fact, there was a garrison of Jewish soldiers in Egypt who were controlling Egypt on behalf of the Persians. Okay? And we get, of course, from the Hebrew Bible in terms of religious policy of the Persians as well. So, how does it begin? Thespis, what kind of name is that? That is the Greek form of an old Persian word, Chishpesh, which is the name of the progenitor of the Achaemenid Empire and Cyrus. So, Thespis was sort of the great-great-grandpa of Cyrus. And we are told, according to traditional historical information, that this Mr. Thespis or Chishpesh was later, well, he had children, and Achaemenes was the next ruler, and Mr. Achaemenes, the name of Achaemenid Empire may come from that, divided his realm between two sons, one to the west named Cyrus the First. This is not Cyrus the Great. And another son named Aryaramnes to the east. So if that is the map of the Iranian plateau on the upper right-hand side, if I maybe have a pointer, I could do that better. But if we don't, that's fine. I should have asked. So do you see that red part? It says Anshan and Susa. And on the map, there is this realm of the Elamite Empire. And there's a city of Susa and Anshan. And this Mr. Cyrus the First is going to rule Anshan. And that is our focal point. It's very close to Mesopotamia, if you can see that. It's from there that Cyrus is going to be born. There is the mound of Anshan on the lower right-hand side. That is where Cyrus was born. Cyrus the First was in fact the grandfather of Cyrus the Great. Here is a genealogical map that you don't need to memorize. But if we said the Hachemenids or the Achaemenids, their lineage comes from Thespis. On the left-hand side, there's Cyrus the First, and then there's Cambyses, and then Cyrus the Great. So you see, Cyrus's grandpa is Cyrus the First. And they like to repeat names, apparently, because Cyrus's father was named Cambyses, and then Cyrus the Great's son is named Cambyses, who conquered Egypt. So it's Cyrus, Cambyses, Cyrus, Cambyses. That's how they're going. And that's the eastern group of Persians who are going to rule the east. Aryaramnes, Arsamnes, Hishtaspes, and Darius the Great. So now you know this by heart. We're going to see probably a cylinder seal imprint of Cyrus the First. So we already, during the time of Cyrus the Great's grandfather, we possess this seal, which is at the Oriental Institute in the Elamite script, language, and cuneiform script, is telling us that this is Cyrus, a local king, probably from the city of Anshan. So Anshan seems to be the important point. Just for reference, you could look up your Bible if you want to use it as a historical text. Otherwise, Anshan is mentioned several times. So it's an important ancient city already. And it is a place where the Elamite and the Mesopotamian, that is the Babylonian world and whatnot, are very much close in contact. Let me just show you. So Anshan would be here. Here's the Elamite world. This is where Cyrus the First is ruling. This is where Cyrus the Second is going to be born. Here's Mesopotamia, the great center of civilization. Here's another aerial map of Anshan. And again, on the right-hand side, on the orange part, on the lower part, there is the map where the location of Anshan is. In modern Persian, the place is called Tal-e Maliyan. And if you go visit today, there's not much. There's a village where people are trying to actually grow crops, and you go tell them, you know what, we need this for excavation. They say, well, we need to eat. So there is a pull and push between the Cultural Heritage Organization and the people living there. But you could see this, the walls of the city. Can you see this? Let me show you. If you look at this aerial view, here is the wall. Okay, so we can see where the city, how it looked like. Here's where people are growing food now within the city. These are probably some ditches, and bunch of cuneiform documents have been found. So we know this is Anshan. So as my archaeologist friend took me there once, just in joking, said, this is where they changed the diaper of Cyrus the Great. There is a sort of the local bathhouse. So we have some information, but there was only a few seasons of excavations. So it would be nice to have more excavations at the birthplace of Cyrus. City of Anshan. So I'm going to leave this PowerPoint with you. If you click on that, you could see some images of Anshan and that link up there. And so here's a nice view of perhaps life in antiquity in southwestern Iran and Mesopotamia, two people preparing something in their local home. I just want you to get a sort of a visual image of how things may have looked like. And in fact, Cyrus, and our Cyrus the Great, is going to call himself King of Anshan. So first and foremost, he's king of that city. And that's where he's going to rise to power. And to rise to power, we have to follow his life and career through Babylonian documents, like the one you just saw upstairs, the Bible, which I mentioned, and then the Greek sources, which was briefly mentioned. It's interesting, in all of these documents, he gets very good grades, A+. So in the Babylonian document, the one that we just saw, for example, the Cyrus Cylinder, he's kind of a savior of Marduk, the great god of Mesopotamia. Marduk chooses him, we'll see. He says, you're the man. You're the one who's going to actually take my religion and make things great. In the Bible, he is, you could say he is an anointed one by God or Yahweh. In Greek tradition, for example, Xenophon, he's the ideal ruler. He can't do no wrong. He's just really good. So he's used in some way in all of these texts and traditions as someone very special. You don't need to write this down. I just want you to know, before Cyrus from the city of Anshan rises, there's this other great empire, which, by the way, is also in the Bible. And these are the Medes. The Medes had ruled the Iranian plateau from the 8th century BC, and they in fact put an end to the great Assyrian Empire. And the last of these Median kings is named Astyages, who rules from 585 approximately to 550 BC. And Astyages is not only a great king, And here are a frieze of Median soldiers from Assyrians, or an Assyrian relief. Astyages' daughter, according to tradition, for example, Herodotus tells us, was named Mandane. And Mandana marries Cambyses the first, son of Cyrus the First. So Mandana is the mother of Cyrus. So you got the princess from the north, the great kingdom, and then you have the small kingdom of Anshan having a marriage alliance. And so Cambyses Mandana gives us Cyrus the Great. And Cyrus the Great is going to rise up in 550 and is going to rise up against his, I guess, grandfather, Astyages, to become the king of the Iranian plateau. Now we have actually good information of what went on during this great battle. The Median forces in the north are coming down, and the Persian forces going up. And we're going to read that, what happens actually at this great battle. Very interesting thing. But at Pasargadae, his capital, we have that relief. If this is Cyrus, what we see is that he is wearing an Elamite robe. Elam is the cultural horizon where Cyrus was born into. He has Mesopotamian wings. On the right-hand side, I want you to see an Assyrian relief of a god. Do you see the wings? Quite similar. And Cyrus is wearing an Egyptian crown from the Middle Kingdom. So why do you have a Middle Kingdom Egyptian crown? You have an Assyrian wings and Elamite robe. It's a composite. He's already, I think, portraying his sense of sort of a ruler of just beyond the Persians, of a much larger world that we are actually facing, if that is indeed Cyrus. And this could have been placed by his son, Cambyses, after the fact. Yes?
Would you clarify what today's land area of Mesopotamia was?
Iraq. Modern-day Iraq. Right. Would be the cities between the two rivers of Tigris and Euphrates. So that is where Mesopotamia is. To the east of it is the Iranian plateau, where Cyrus from the city of Anshan is going to rise. So first he rises up and is going to challenge his grandfather up north on the Iranian plateau, the Medes, and he's just conquered that.
But you said Mesopotamian wings, Syrian wings.
Okay, yeah. Assyria is northern Mesopotamia. Assyria, not Syria, I'm sorry. Assyrians are the other Semitic important Mesopotamian people who are living farther north in what is northern Iraq, perhaps, okay, and southern Syria, actually. Okay, so he's using the local traditions. And this is the cuneiform document that tells us what happened during the battle between Cyrus and the Medes. So we got the armies before each other. And then the text says, King Astyages, remember, the king of Medes, called up his troops and marched against Cyrus, king of Anshan, or Persia, in order to meet him in battle. The army of Astyages revolted against him, and in fetters they delivered him to Cyrus. So probably there was some negotiations before, and as it was perhaps mentioned yesterday, Cyrus is half, I guess, Median. Mother is princess, so it wouldn't have been so hard for the Medes. So Cyrus is very crafty in negotiations, and that already comes through from the first great battle that he engages in. And so Cyrus marched against the country of Ecbatana, which is the capital of the Medes, the royal residence. He seized silver, gold, other valuables of the country Ecbatana. He took as booty and brought to Anshan. So now he has the money. If you want to have a campaign, you need to have money or borrow money, right? And then the government will owe, right? That we know. So where is the next campaign? The next campaign is not Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is left out, and Cyrus is going to go now with his Persian and Median forces all the way to what is modern-day Turkey, what we call Anatolia. And so from down here, he's gone and defeated, of course, the Median king, right? So this is now part of his territory. He's just going to take a journey this way, and we'll get to Sardis, where the great king Croesus is ruling on behalf of the Lydian kingdom. The Lydian kingdom, and Croesus is there. And here are some Median soldiers who are going to go on and capture Sardis, the capital of the Median kingdom or empire. And then comes Mesopotamia or Babylonia. Now, Babylonians thought the world of themselves. They thought that is the center of the world, and in many ways it was. It was so important that one of the earliest maps we have from the ancient world, perhaps the earliest one, is made by the Babylonians on the city of Babylon. On the left-hand side, that's the city of Babylon. Okay? So there's a cuneiform text and describing the city of Babylon and the river that runs through it right here. So the Babylonians knew they had something very special. And on the map, if you look on the right-hand side of this fertile crescent, and Mesopotamia, Babylonia is mentioned, or Babylon, next to Susa and Elam. So you see how close it is. And so this is the next big conquest. So how should Cyrus conquer Mesopotamia, which is being held by the Babylonians? Well, you have this make-out of the great temple of Marduk in Babylonia. There's an aerial view on the right-hand side. As it was mentioned yesterday during the Iran-Iraq war, unfortunately, it was used as an army base, so about a third of it is destroyed. But we still have, through excavations, some sense of how this place looked. And the Saglia, or the temple, was the great center of religion, where during the New Year festival, every year the king had to go through this ritual to make sure everything is done well and the year goes well. See, you need proper rituals, so the gods perform their logical sort of rain, sun, and so on for things to grow and whatnot. And if you don't do that, of course, then bad things could happen. And we know the previous king, Nabonidus, apparently is neglecting his ritual duties. And so the priests are very unhappy. You know, the king is not performing his ritual. What happens if there's a drought because of this? So people are unhappy. And he tends to spend time a little bit further out of the city, in another city. And there's the statue of great god Marduk on the upper right-hand side. So Cyrus wants to come and conquer this city. What do you do? What do you do? We think he made a pact with some of the people in Babylonia. And he entered the city with almost any bloodshed. He got in there quite peacefully, which is, again, the second time he's doing it, right? The great Median Empire, peaceful. Babylon, peaceful. So in his cylinder, it says, Bel Marduk, this is the great Mesopotamian god, casts his eyes over all countries, seeking for a righteous ruler. Then he called by name Cyrus, king of Anshan, and pronounced him ruler of the lands. So that is what we get in that cylinder of the after effect, of course, an after story of what was going on. Because Marduk, the great god, is unhappy, and hence looks for a new king who is going to perform the ritual functions to make sure things go well. Okay? I just want to put the Cyrus cylinder in context of other cylinders from Mesopotamia. It's not the first time that we have these cylinders. We have several other cylinders like that. These are dedicatory cylinders, were placed into the walls under the temples. Cyrus's cylinder, I think, was placed under the temple. Okay? So this was done. 44 lines. And if you, I've just watched this 2.5-hour film by Griffith, Intolerance. I don't know if you've seen it. 1916, I think, is it?
Yeah.
Yes. And that is a scene from that, Cyrus entering Babylon. Okay. So this is the earliest silent film we have. Cyrus is actually in it, is one of the 4 characters in this 4-part movie, silent film, which is really interesting. And so he enters in peace, into Babylon and honors local tradition, rebuilds the temples, not only the Sagdia but other temples, and restores ritual. So he's kind of a restorer of things. In fact, in Cyrus Cylinder, line 22, he says, when I went as harbinger of peace into Babylon. So he also is emphasizing he's going in there peacefully. Okay? And then we're told that he frees captives. And I wonder who was being held captive in Babylon. Good guess, I think. Cyrus Cylinder, line 26. I soothed their weariness. I freed them from their bonds. Of course, it doesn't mention exactly who it is, but of course we have alternative sources, right? Who tell us that there is a Babylonian captivity, right? And these people are going to be freed. So we probably think at least Jews are one of the groups, if not the only one, that are going to be freed from Mesopotamia. So let's go to the Bible. Let's look at the book of Isaiah. And now let's see what the Hebrew tradition tells us as a view about Cyrus. And of course, that's not the Bible. That's just a piece that you probably have upstairs as well, a cuneiform document. But the book Isaiah 45:1 says, "Thus says the Lord to his anointed, I Messiah, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held to subdue nations before him, and loose the armor of kings, to open before him to the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut." So he is, again, on the part of the Jewish tradition, is also taken as a very important person who's led to conquer the world. And of course, Josephus, an important writer in the 1st century, who's important for history of course, the Jews, as well as ancient history, provides us with a letter of Cyrus that he had written to the Jews. And this, of course, is important because you will guess by the end of reading this, "I have given leave to as many of the Jews that dwell in my country as please to return to their own country, and to rebuild their city, and to build the temple of God at Jerusalem. I have also sent my treasurer Mithridates and Zerubbabel, the governor of the Jews, that they may lay the foundations of the temple. I require also that the expenses for these things may be given out of my revenues." What temple are we talking about? So what period of temple would be now? The Second Temple, right? And so he's not only having the Jews go back, but he's also paying for its rebuilding. This is why this special relationship is coming together, and the Jews and the Persians are going to deal very well with each other all the way to the outer distances, Egypt and Kingdom of Israel, or Judea, I would say. And then Cyrus builds a palace for himself, or a city, I should say. Pasargadae means the city of Persians, at least one translation. And here is on the lower right-hand side, actually, that winged genie on the lower right-hand side that we had its drawing. On the upper right-hand side is the tomb of Cyrus as he lays. And on the lower left-hand side is one of the palaces, where not much remains, but still a good bit. There are multiple palaces and other things. And it shows this artistic influence from Mesopotamia, Lydia. Again, these Persians were quite adept in borrowing from other traditions. They had no inhibitions. In fact, Herodotus says they adapt to foreign traditions quite nicely. And Herodotus is something else. They love to celebrate their birthdays. I don't know why. I don't do it much anymore, but still. So Pasargadae, why is Pasargadae important? Because it's the first Persian garden that we have records of. And the Persians called this place a Paradise, which in Median, another Iranian language, is called Paradisa, which through Greek is going to enter into, of course, later on English as paradise. It literally meant a walled garden. It was a place that, according to sort of Persian ideology, all the beautiful things are kept in there. Animals, flowers. We know Cyrus was fond of gardening. These Persian kings liked gardening, and I think I am descendant because I love gardening. That's what I do when I want to be happy. And so we can see some of the drawings of the sketches of the palace and the garden, which is divided into 4. We call that in Persian charbagh, which is quite influential in later history of gardens, that you might find it all the way to Alhambra or India in Taj Mahal and whatnot. And so this paradise was a place of perfect comfort and beauty. So do you see now why it's the word paradise in the Bible, how its meaning comes about, is because of this utmost place of beauty. Here's a nice Persian garden in Kashan on the right-hand side from the 19th century. According to Greek sources, this paradise was a place where many animals and plants possessing all that the seasons brings forth, thick with every sort of trees, full of every good and beautiful that the earth cares to grow, full of plants. That is a paradise, a Persian paradise. Yes?
In the Old Testament, that sounds like the Garden of Eden.
Great. So again, just to have an educated guess, we could see sort of the semantics of not only the term, but the idea moving from one tradition to another, right? And of course, the Persians and the Jews were in close contact, so could be possible, quite so. He's going to conquer further Phoenicia and Palestine, and he's going to also plan to conquer Egypt, where he doesn't get to do so because he has to go to the east and fight these other nomadic Iranian tribes. Iranians are a large group of people who were initially all of them nomads, and the ones that stayed nomadic, at least one of them, the latest, are the Scythians. And these Scythians are all over the place, from the Black Sea all the way to Central Asia. The Scythians. And here's a gold piece that shows 2 Scythians. And he is going to die in 530 BC, according to the common tradition, fighting the Scythians. And so the body is brought back and put into the tomb. So that is what he does in terms of his career, you might say, for Cyrus. And the last thing I may talk about, if we have time, I'll say a little bit more. If not, I'll just talk about religion. Remember I said this is maybe Cyrus, and you should ask why. Because until about 150 years ago, on top of this genie, there was a trilingual inscription in Old Persian, in Elamite, and in Babylonian, which said, "I am Cyrus the king." Okay, so we think that may be one reason that this may have been Cyrus, or at least imagined as Cyrus, and that is the tomb. So what did he believe in? What was his religion? That's a very difficult thing. So I'm just going to now become really sort of tangential and get into some strange things. One thing is to see what kind of rituals did Cyrus associate himself with. Arrian, a biographer of course, Alexander the Great, talks about horse sacrifice, specifically white horse, for Cyrus at Pasargadae. Pasargadae is the city. So why do they sacrifice a white horse? In Sanskrit and in the Indic tradition, we have something that is called the Ashvamedha, which is basically a horse sacrifice. And so this seems to be a common Indo-Iranian tradition. So here's a horse on the left-hand side. I don't know, I think this is a Gupta coin, but I'm not sure. Perhaps relating to this Ashvamedha. But we have a very beautiful Indian painting of an Ashvamedha, where the king, in order to receive sovereignty and power, goes through this year-long ritual to finally have this horse sacrifice. It takes a year. It's not, just go sacrifice a white horse. And it's for king's victory and sovereignty. So that we have from the Indian tradition, which are the cousins of the Iranians. The closest cousins are the Indians. In the Zoroastrian sacred scripture, this is now part of this ancient Iranian religion, we have an important part of it, of these Zoroastrian hymns, called the Abanyash. This is the sacrifices to water. And it says, "Most wise king," this is a king called Kekavus, "offers up a sacrifice to a mountain with 100 male horses, 1,000 oxen, 10,000 lambs." This is sort of figuratively to make sacrifice because this deity is so important. But more importantly, there is this other Zoroastrian hymn called Mehriash, the hymn to Mithra, another great god of the ancient Iranians, who's known in the Avesta and Yasna 10 as the Lord of the Pastures, to be victorious over villains, to receive the glory or fortune by sacrificing a white horse. So we see now consistently in the Zoroastrian tradition of the Yash, there is this horse sacrifice. And Greek sources tell us that what? Cyrus also sacrificed a horse. In fact, we know that the Armenian kingdom, this is the satrapy of Armenia of the Achaemenid Empire, had to supply 20,000 horses annually to the Persian Empire. Now, these weren't all sacrificed, mind you. Armenian horses were great horses, and so they were used for cavalry. But I'm trying to make the connections of the importance of horses. And so we think that Cyrus was part of this Indo-Iranian religion from all the way, the ancient Indo-Iranian, all the way to the Zoroastrian tradition. I did a little book, which I should probably mention later on, that I wrote a chapter on the religion of Cyrus. So it's really easy to read. If you're interested, you could read. Should I say anything about the afterglow of Cyrus, or should I stop?
Keep going.
Okay, 5 more minutes. So here's Pasargadae. Here is another palace part. And Cyrus was so important that every other succeeding king had to come, before he became a king, come to the palace and now perform proper ritual. So let's see what kind of ritual. Here's Pasargadae in spring. Plutarch, another Greek source, tells us, or a classical source, the new king made an expedition to Pasargadae that he might receive the royal initiation at the hand of the Persian priest. We were talking about Zoroastrian priests probably. So the next king has to go to Pasargadae and receive the initiation. And what he had to do is, into this sanctuary, the candidate for initiation must pass. After laying aside his own proper robe, must put on that which Cyrus the Elder, that is Cyrus the Great, used to wear before he became a king. So you put on the cloak of the great king symbolically, and then you are initiated into kingship. So there's specific rituals, and there's a reason I put that coin there. This is a much later coin. Here is something else that is at Pasargadae. This may have been the tower where the king sort of put the regalia, the banner, and the coat may have been kept here and came out and became the king. There's exactly a exact replica of that made by Darius, the third Achaemenid king, right there, close to Persepolis. And I want to compare that with the Persis coinage, a coinage from 1st century BC. Do you see the structure on the right-hand side? It's probably the same thing, or the one at Pasargadae, where there's a man in front of it, there's fire altar, there's glory or Ahura Mazda, and there's a banner to the right-hand side. All the regalias of kingship that you have to go before this and perform the function. And so, to finish, these are the tombs of the great Achaemenid kings into the mountains. Do you see the one right to the mountain? And here is this cube structure that the king was going to get initiated. So the idea is, as the old king was laid to rest, the new king went through the initiation and came out before the structure. So long live the king, and there is a new king. Thank you.
Where is Pasargadae? Where is it?
It is 70 kilometers north of Persepolis in the province of Fars, in what is known as province of Persis. Let me show you right here on the map. So, here's Persepolis. So you just go a little bit further north, there will be Pasargadae.
Okay.
It's the capital of Cyrus and his son. And then the capital moves to Persepolis.
And is the tomb of Cyrus, it's still, the physical building is there, but what about the crypt itself?
No, we already know when Alexander enters into Pasargadae, when he's coming back, he has seen that, or when he's going actually, he has seen that the tomb has been molested. The tomb is in shambles, things have been torn out, has been thrown out. He actually orders to have it restored and put everything back. Already 330 BC, or before that, things are, not good.
Did they, in those tombs, did they put a lot of gold and stuff in them?
As we are told, according to classical sources, not only there was a purple robe and sort of a chair where the king used to probably sit on, and that's why you do that ritual, and there was probably some gold, and that's why, you know, in antiquity until today you have gold diggers. They go, and even the tombs I showed you onto the mountain, they've all been cracked open and things have been taken. And that's common in antiquity. Yes, Ken?
One question I have is, in the textbooks, when I'm reading through, it often says, like, you know, it refers to the empire as the greatest empire at the time when Alexander conquered it, and that Alexander, like, borrowed many of the ideas. Do you have any sort of examples?
Sure. Look, when a new empire comes into being or a new conqueror, they don't completely destroy everything that was before them. There is much continuity. The Persians came, they borrowed much from the Mesopotamians and the Elamites. You saw some of the artistic traditions, sort of phraseology and so on. So Alexander, in a way, presented himself as king of Asia. And in fact, one great scholar, Pierre Briand, calls Alexander the sort of the last king of the Achaemenid Empire. He's really the fruition of the Achaemenid dream of conquest of this world. But we know, for example, in terms of administration, many of the satrapies, the governors, were kept the Persian satraps. He started wearing Persian clothes. He started partaking in ritual initiation of the Zoroastrian priests, which the Macedonians were just abhorred. You know, they just said, what is this guy doing? He must be losing his mind. In Susa, he asked that in the Persian tradition, his own generals perform what is known in Greek as prosokinesis. That is, you bend before and you sort of fall flat on your face before the king. That is quite Persian. And the Macedonians saying, that's not what we do. He said, well, now we do that because I'm the king of probably not only Macedonia and Greeks, but also this entire Persian Empire. And he marries into this Iranian dynastic line, right? So, you know, his offspring was supposed to be a Greco-Persian, right? He has this great marriage between Persian noble women and Greco-Macedonian soldiers, which the next ruler of this great empire, Seleucids, which comes right after Cyrus, his wife is Apame, is an Iranian. So we have this sort of Iranian, Macedonian, you know, lineage. So there's quite a bit of continuity. Yes?
You were touching a little bit on the religion at that time, or the various practices. The Zoroastrian, like Avesta, inside of Persepolis, there used to be a large library. Was there?
We have no idea. We don't know. Most guesses are that this Zoroastrian hymns are just like in India, the Vedas, are memorized. It's part of the oral tradition. That these were not written down until much later. The Avesta, our best guess that it was written in the Sasanian period in the 3rd or 4th century, in the 4th century. The Vedas, the important hymns of the Vedic tradition, you know, was not written down until 1000 AD or 1400 AD. Some places they still refuse to do that because these are meant to have, these are mantras or matras. They're supposed to have powerful expression. It's not the reading tradition. Yes?
When we think of Cyrus as his program behind his conquest, starting with the Medes and then Lydia and Babylon, can we say that maybe first and foremost he was thinking about reading these places from a crew leader, and then not necessarily expanding his empire, but in fact, you know, in essence, it led him to the expansion of his empire. And then can we also assume that that may be the reason that he has been, you know, referred as some kind of Messiah and divine figure in the Bible?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are various ways of looking at it. We certainly can look at it as such. Conquering is an act that is violent in some ways, okay? That we cannot deny. Now, what you do with that, how you conquer and what you do afterwards is very important. So what makes Cyrus, I think, special in antiquity is the after effect. War is war. Of course, he makes a lot of negotiations. So he's very good in negotiating to not get into war, right? With the Medes, with the Hebrews, but not with the Lydians. That's all out war. But what he does afterwards, he lets everybody stay as they are. There's this Achaemenid Persian tradition told by the Greeks and put in the mouth of Darius, that there's this discussion, what is the best sort of tradition and so on. Darius says, each people's nomos or tradition is good for them. That is, you don't try to change people's traditions, language, and religions. You keep them as they are, and that's when people are most happy. So I think there's a lot of that goes with it. But we should remember, these documents are after the fact effects, and he has to also justify what he did that. So Marduk picked him, right, and so on. So there's a little bit of course, propaganda, you might say, that comes with this. So obviously, you're not going to say, oh, I killed a lot. Well, actually, before this, they did. We killed a lot of people. We impaled, 20,000 people. We beheaded people in other parts of the ancient Near East. There's none of that here. You're right. Yes?
What is the relationship between Baal, Marduk, and Ahura Mazda?
There's basically no relationship. Bel Marduk, or Marduk, is the great Mesopotamian Babylonian deity whose sanctuary is in Babylon. Ahura Mazda is the great deity, or someone has called it the super deity of the Zoroastrian religion. So the Iranians, many of them, not all of them, apparently worshipped at certain times. Certainly by the time of Darius, there is an intense Ahura Mazda worship. Marduk is a great Mesopotamian deity in Mesopotamia, which is worshipped by the Babylonians and the people in Mesopotamia. But Cyrus, when he enters Babylon, he pays homage to Marduk, as he's the great god. When he's dealing with the Hebrews, he has the same thing with the Jewish god. And then he doesn't really tell us exactly what he believes in. That's one other thing. I don't talk about my religion. I really respect your religion. I respect your religion. But there's some circumstantial evidence from the sacrificial ceremonies at Pasargadae that may point to this ancient Indo-Iranian tradition. Yes, and then
I'm confused on 2 points.
Sure.
Excuse me. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, in Isaiah, it is mentioned Messiah. Did the Hebrews at that time, in that particular book, see Cyrus as Messiah-like?
This is things that maybe from the theological seminary can tell us, but I would just briefly say Meshiach, meaning sort of anointed one. Anointed one, which in, I think, Greek translation, it ends up to be like Christ. Right?
That's the Greek.
That's the Greek. Yeah, it's very, very, very. So it's like there's that progression, but there apparently he is an anointed one, and this is the special relations. I don't want, if you want to say more. But
yeah, he was given that same designation as the Messiah that Christians give to Jesus.
Really?
So he has that importance of a position in the Hebrew tradition.
I see. Also, you mentioned Elamite language. And you said it's like the Basque language. There's no source of it.
Yes.
It stands alone as a language?
Yes, it is not related to any other languages. It's written in cuneiform, like Mesopotamian, Babylonian, and Old Persian, and so on. But so far, no relations have been found with anything. And so the suggestion is that they probably came from India many, many thousands of years before that. But that's a guess. It's not related to anything that we know. Maybe part of the Dravidian tradition.
Related to this route you outlined for us of his conquest, there was the Persian mail route. Was that in place before Cyrus or after?
We get information with Darius, who is really the architect of the empire. Cyrus is the creator of this empire. So now it's going to take some time to put things together. The third king, Darius, when he comes to power, he's going to put together this great royal road that goes to the east and the west. It just doesn't go to the west. There's the map that I saw, which is great, in the gallery. It shows a red line from, I think, Susa to Sardis. That's just part of the road. It's 1,400 miles long. It traverses this empire all the way to India and the north and back and forth. It had 111 stops, and it had, and we have the letters, these laissez-passer. If so-and-so can go from here to there, please give him fresh food, horses, and so on and so on. So that is very much connected with Darius. Yes?
What was the reason that Cyrus went to war with his grandfather?
Well, I would say ambition, probably, if the story is correct, right? We have to take it that, in fact, he was the son of the daughter of Astyages, right? And Herodotus didn't get this wrong, right? But it must be ambition, an upstart king. This is all about the story of an upstart king from an obscure region in the ancient Near East. And he makes this great empire, just out of, southwest Fars, which wasn't that important in antiquity.
And where did he get his idea of tolerance, since he's so unusual?
Now, my guess is, this is just personal guess, when you are brought up in a multicultural setting, you tend to have a much different, I think, attitude than when you're just, with your own, I think, people. He is in a part that, in Anshan, they're Elamites. They're probably Mesopotamians right next to you. They're people from Eastern Iran. He's Persian. He's a newcomer, right? Probably an immigrant of maybe 3-4 generations, right? If you're grown up in there where you see these different people, you tend to probably deal differently than your own. Just think of your own tradition, my guess. Yes?
This is kind of maybe not connected, but I'm curious to know if at all Catalhayuk is connected to any of this.
So Catalhayuk, which is to the west of this Iranian plateau, in fact closer to Sardis, which is now being excavated by several teams, I think, has very little or no relations to this tradition. I know Professor Elizabeth Carter is digging there from UCLA and several other people. It's a great ancient site, but it's a little bit older, I think, probably.
Yes.
It's older than this.
I was wondering if people maybe started there and migrated.
We don't think they migrated from there, but that's much older site than we were talking about.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.